Once we yawn, we continue paying attention to breathing to develop the discernment of how much we resonate with whatever we're focusing on in our dream. It's an amazing maneuver of consciousness, if you will. It's completely different from what most people think it should be doing in meditation. What we're doing is something that most people never ever consider doing. If you want to keep getting the same results everyone else gets, do the same thing everyone else does. If you want to get different results, you've got to do things differently, right? So we are doing things radically differently. It's a major shortcut on the path of enlightenment. We're not on the path to enlightenment. We are on the path of enlightenment. We can actually experience enlightening moments along this path quite frequently. We are not on the path hoping that one day, sometime in the distant future, maybe we will experience enlightenment. And even if we do experience enlightenment, expecting that it's going to stay the same is faulty. Nothing is ever unchanging. Change is the most constant thing in the universe. So enlightenment also is not a permanent state. It's an experience. And what we're learning is how to get enlightening experiences on more frequent basis. If we do this frequently enough, we develop the skill. We basically develop an enlightenment muscle, or it creates our neural pathways that become more and more habituated. And that means that we actually start living a more enlightened lifestyle. Instead of perceiving enlightenment as some distant destination at the end of the long journey, we actually realize that this is a lifestyle. We can live an enlightened life right here and now, and from this point on, this is the beginning of the path of enlightenment. And when we experience enlightening moments, it's okay to fall asleep again. We just don't want to be in slumber for the rest of our lives. We want to wake up again and essentially develop that awakening muscle. That's what we call lucidity. That's what we call spiritual awakening. That is essentially what gives us the ability to live our lives in the flow, free of suffering. And even if suffering does happen, we just feel grateful for having it. You may think, wait, this doesn't make any sense. Why would you be thankful for suffering? That's the most stupid idea, right? But suffering is essential for enlightenment. That's right. I've never heard of anyone who attained enlightenment without having gone through a significant amount of suffering. Has ever anyone achieved enlightenment without a significant amount of suffering? I don't think so. It's essential because it serves as a catalyst for awakening. It's like in a dream. If you're having a nightmare, you're much more likely to become awake in the dream, become lucid, because you are really challenged and highly motivated to wake up. Well, that's what we learn. We learn how to not run away from challenges, but how to relax under pressure, develop resilience, seek out challenges, and invite learning opportunities that most other people will perceive as problems. And when we perceive problems as learning opportunities, we learn a great deal, and we don't perceive them as problems. Well, that means you're living your life problems-free. Who wouldn't want that? They literally transform all the problems into learning opportunities in your mind. You no longer perceive anything as a problem, and everything is welcome as a learning opportunity. And the more advanced the learning opportunity, the more challenging it is. It's like going to school. In the first grade, the math problems are 1 + 1 = 2. And in the second grade, maybe it's 2 + 2, or 2 × 2 = 4. Okay, well, that's much more challenging for the first grader. For the third grader, it's no challenge at all. Third grader can handle much more complicated multiplications or other math problems. And the fourth and fifth and sixth grader, they all deal with more challenging problems, not less. But that's how the growth happens. Most people think, okay, when I become really enlightened or when I live in my life in the flow, I'm going to be free of any challenges. No, the challenges actually multiply. The more advanced you become, the more challenges pile up. It's like you graduate from high school, go to college. Well, the math problems in college are a lot more challenging than the math problems in high school. If you graduate from undergrad school and go to grad school, the problems there are not going to be any easier. They're going to be much more challenging. And it applies not only to math, but to any sciences, including the science of living human life. So we develop growth mindset, where we recognize that in order to grow, we need to experience challenges and welcome them as learning opportunities. And the most beautiful thing is that we can apply this not only to the future, but also towards the past. That's right. All the problems that we ever experienced, can we look at them through this filter of perception, through this lens of recognizing them as learning opportunities? When we do that, we realize that everything that we experienced was a blessing. And we become grateful for having those experiences in our lives because they taught us a great deal. If we didn't learn, we need to get into the learning state and learn in a hurry as much as possible from all those experiences that we didn't learn in our past. But if we actually learn from them, we become grateful for having them. And what's the power of gratitude? Well, it transforms the quality of one's life. And it literally means that we resonate now with that which we didn't resonate with before. By transforming ourselves from within, we didn't change the past. We can't change the past, but we change our own energy in such a way that we now actually feel grateful for having those challenging experiences. I was shot at. I got blown up by landmines. I got kidnapped in Ukraine. I experienced being thrown in jail and became a refugee. Essentially, I just look at every single experience like that in my life and I feel grateful for having that experience. It's like, wow, that was an amazing learning opportunity. I learned so much. I feel very grateful for that. Somebody who lives their life in this way, in regard to the past, literally feel like 50% of human suffering is gone because I'm no longer suffering from my past. Can we apply the same approach to the future? Absolutely. We look at the future and remind ourselves, okay, I'm dreaming right now. I can turn it into a nightmare of a daydream by focusing on something I don't resonate with. But let's remember that this is a learning opportunity. I'm playing this scenario and seeing what can I learn from this particular potential scenario. And then let's not get stuck there. Let's explore other alternative pathways and find the pathway that we resonate most with, because that is going to be the experience of flow. If we pay attention to our breathing, it gives us the gauge, and then we can choose our course of action accordingly. As we do that, we develop discernment as to what to do. And that literally means that there is no suffering we experience in regard to our future. We experience the sense of lucidity and flow, and as we develop this ability to set ourselves free from suffering in the past and free from suffering in the future, we literally become free of suffering. Welcome to Nirvana, my friend. This is exactly how we create a lifestyle that is devoid of unnecessary suffering. By unnecessary suffering, I mean suffering that we unwittingly experience. And you may be like, wait a moment, what kind of a silly idea is that? Are we going to create suffering on demand? Well, just like the tension that we were exploring, we can also experience suffering on demand. Just like we tense up on purpose and then release tension, we can also do the same thing with suffering. Remember, suffering is essential for enlightenment. So we don't want to just set ourselves completely free of suffering and never experience it again. We want to experience suffering to the degree that is needed for maintaining our motivation for enlightenment, bodhicitta as they call it in Sanskrit. This is actually a profound transmission I am sharing right now. The skill of creating suffering on demand is something that the Dalai Lama talks a lot about. It's called compassion. Compassion, by definition, means suffering together. Compassion, enlightenment, means exactly that, suffering. Why would we want to suffer together with others? Not just because we have some empathy for them and want them to feel better. We actually do this also for the purpose of our enlightenment. We create our own suffering on demand for as long as this is necessary, and then we quit doing it when it's no longer necessary. Compassion becomes not just something that we experience because we're so empathetic. Compassion is a skill that we develop in order to experience more and more enlightenment, provide ourselves more motivation. If we don't experience any suffering, we may just not be motivated enough. And then we may be wondering, why am I not awakening? Well, because I'm not living a full-fledged nightmare. In order to experience awakening, I want to create a nightmare on demand. How? By focusing on something I don't resonate with, or maybe somebody is experiencing struggle or suffering, and we want to be compassionate with them, suffering together. And when we no longer need that suffering, because we feel like, okay, I reminded myself to awaken to the dreamlike nature of this experience, I simply stop doing it. Now, some people may be wondering, how does it look if you're compassionate and then you quit being compassionate? Isn't it going to be somewhat incongruent? All these worries are just that, daydreams, projections. Remember, whenever you think of what other people think of you, that's a projection, that's a daydream, by definition. There's no way that you actually know what people think, you just simply project it. And we learn how to choose. What is it that I want to project? And when we do project, we do it in the exact same way, consciously. Conscious projection of our mental images, our mental projections, is another superpower that you can develop if you experiment with it. And the more you practice, the better you get at it. And that essentially becomes a test of whether or not you're powerful or forceful. If you're forceful, you'll be forcing these projections onto people. If you're powerful, you learn how to let them experience it without any expectations or attachments. Which way would you want to be? That's my question, and I hope that your answer will be powerful without attachments or expectations, which means you're not creating more karma for yourself or for others. Now, we can go further into this rabbit hole, but I want to be mindful of our time together and not overwhelm you with too much transmission. So I'm going to wrap up. Let's get a bigger picture that helps with learning whatever lessons are contained within those challenges, because you can see the dots connecting with each other more naturally. You can also see the connection between cause and effect. If Buddha Shakyamuni, the founder of Buddhism, was right about it, and I think he was, he said that ignorance is the main cause of suffering. But ignorance of what? The ignorance of karma, the ignorance of law of cause and effect is the main cause of suffering. So in order to learn about cause and effect connections, we need to look at things from a higher perspective, so to speak. And from a bird's eye point of view, then we can see the layout of the land much easier. We can see how certain things influence some other things. Basically, cause and effect connections are no longer mystery. They become more obvious to us. And that means that we're learning a great deal. Instead of perceiving this entire development as a problem and a major crisis, I look at it as a learning opportunity instead of problems. Of course, a lot of people will say, but look, this is a big problem, and that is a problem, and all the problems everywhere. Well, if we look at them as problems, it simply means that we forgot to put the learning hat on, so to speak. So I just developed this habit of putting the learning hat on. It's like that the neural pathway is pretty well established in my brain, and I default to it. Instead of once in the blue moon, I get into a learning state daily. Basically, that's what in Buddhism often referred to as beginner's mind. Getting into the learning state by default. Whenever you don't know what to do, just get into learning state and learn. Sometimes you need to pay attention to things you don't resonate with, because you're going to learn something from them.